But isn't
that
it?
will not be a feature of tonight's meeting.
Yeah, it's really bad you can't have anything nice like this without getting hijacked. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We'll call to order the April 20th meeting of the Morgan County Board of Commissioners. If you would please stand with me for the pledge and then remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you please bow with me? Father God, we're grateful to come before you again tonight in the form of the most representative government, and that is our local government. We thank you for the honor to participate both as officials and as voters. We pray that the decisions that are made here tonight would be in the best interest of our community, Morgan County, that we call home, and that we're so blessed to be able to live in, to work in, and play in. Thank you for all of the blessings that you're providing for us, even through challenging times. Thank you for the recovery of so many individuals. Thank you for continued advancements in testing and other items that are helping our community and our state and nation battle uncertain times. We certainly see you at work, even in times of where we might question that or have uncertainty of our own. We ask that you continue to watch over our first responders, from our men and women, our dispatch center, that truly do represent the front lines, all the way down through our sheriff's department, EMS personnel, and others that are responding in times of need. We also thank you greatly for our emergency management and our Board of Health that have taken such instrumental leadership roles during these last, what is really now the last couple of months. And we thank you for their service and dedication to keeping our community safe. We love you and thank you for all that you are doing in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good evening to everyone. We are, of course, streaming on Facebook and YouTube due to our ongoing situation with the COVID-19. Before we get into our business, I wanted to echo a theme that was touched on in the invocation, mentioning our emergency management in particular. Wanted to give some extra credit to them on a letter that we had received. Over the past couple of years, Mr. Mark Toomey, EMA Director, has worked with a number of interns from Vincennes University that are pursuing degrees in Homeland Security and Public Safety. And we got a letter of sorts of praise from Vincennes University, thanking Mr. Toomey and Morgan County for mainly his efforts in providing a good internship program for their students over the years. And I just wanted to say thank you to Mark. Obviously, no, he's not here with us this evening, but those types of things give our community a good name and something positive that those students will take with them and hopefully remember us and maybe even come back and look for employment here at some point in the future. So wanted to thank him for that. And while Mr. Steve Lyde is in the room, wanted to say thank you to him as well. Your position is one that we don't hear from much until there's a real problem. And I think a lot of people wondered, what all functions does the Board of Health do and the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator, and they're getting a good example of that. And you guys have stepped up to the plate and just done a tremendous job. So thank you to Steve and to the entire Board of Health for your continued leadership through this. Thank you. So on to our business. First up, we have a status update on the various actions that the commissioners have taken. One, to limit public access to buildings. We took steps to limit public access to really all buildings with the exception of the courthouse. That building was covered under some restrictions from the Indiana Supreme Court. We did that back all the way, believe it or not, it's been all the way back into the middle of March. And then we also had the executive order on designating essential and non-essential personnel. That was a mandate passed on to us through the governor's stay-at-home executive order. And so both of those are going to continue unless a commissioner desires to take another course of action tonight. Specifically, the executive order 2020-1, which limits public access to the buildings. That was specifically designed to stay in force until the end of the public health emergency or by recension of the commissioners, whichever occurs first. And then number two, 2020-2, is the essential and non-essential designation that I mentioned that we were required to do per the governor's order. As you are all aware at this point, that order at the state level has been extended and will now expire at 11:59 p.m. on May 1st. There are indications that the order will begin to loosen over the next couple of weeks, primarily as it deals with healthcare services, and then they'll be looking at probably an extension beyond that, but in a very different form than what it's in today. So what all of that means for us is, unless we take another action, we're going to continue to operate this building and our other buildings as we have been, at least through the conclusion of business on May 1st. Any comments from the commissioners or any desire or interest to take a different course of action? Next item on the agenda, we have a proclamation designating May 7th, 2020 as the National Day of Prayer. Certainly all of the folks in our room and several people listening will know that for a number of years the county has hosted or participated in the National Day of Prayer, it's often been held right in this room. This year coincides with May 7th. That, of course, with the coronavirus situation, will not be taking place in person. The leadership of the National Day of Prayer has decided to conduct that event more than likely via the radio, but May 7th will still be the National Day of Prayer. In the past, the state and city both have adopted resolutions recognizing that particular day as the National Day of Prayer, and so we have put forth a proclamation on behalf of the county as well for May 7th. Turn that over to the board for any questions or discussion.
Make a motion.
We'll certainly entertain a motion if you're ready.
Go ahead and make a motion that we go ahead and pass, Morgan County Board of Commissioners pass proclamation for National Day of Prayer being May 7th of 2020 this year.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the proclamation. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0, and we will sign this proclamation and then forward it on to the National Day of Prayer organizers. So May 7, 2020 will be recognized in Morgan County as the National Day of Prayer. Next on our agenda, we have some emergency repairs to make to the coroner's office and morgue, specifically with a faulty roof. Josh, do you have an update on that to supplement our proposals that we've received?
Yes. So it was found that there was issues with the roof. There were some holes in the boards. There were shingles that were missing. It was deemed upon having multiple contractors come out there that it was not something that could just be patched. It needed to be replaced. Due to the nature of the building, the issues with COVID-19, we wanted to go ahead and get that secured. Michelle did a terrific job with this. She reached out, she got 4 quotes. The low quote was to West Knox and Sons. It was $6,900 to do the entire structure. That has been completed. The roof is now in functional shape, and they did a nice job. And so we're here before you all to ask for approval in the minutes to acknowledge that this was an emergency need as required by state code.
Thank you, Josh. And as he noted, she did, that was an urgent situation that needed to be addressed. She did an excellent job of procuring 4 proposals, all from Morgan County businesses, each one of them. And you see here, as Josh had indicated, our lowest bidder was at $6,900, also a firm that we've done business with before, all the way up to a high quote of $17,000. So any questions of Josh? And if there aren't any, we would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the quote from West Knox and Sons.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the proposal from West Knox and Sons. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. And motion on that carries 3-0. Next item on the agenda, we have an appointment of our county's 911 coordinator. Turn that over to Mr. Kenny Hale. Want to make note that want to draw a distinction between this and the director of the 911 center. This particular position is more from an addressing standpoint. Mr. Hale?
Yeah, all this is doing is basically just shifting me, being the 911 coordinator and shifting that over to Sandy Mosier in the Planning Commission office. And that's basically taking care of the readdressing, addressing, also taking care of coordinating the road signs, getting them up, and then any errors inside, that kind of stuff.
Any questions of Mr. Hale? So the proposed appointment is Miss Sandy Mosier from the Planning Office. If there are no questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Make a motion to go ahead and appoint Sandy Mosier for the 911 coordinator for 2020.
Motion's made to appoint Sandy Mosier 911 coordinator for 2020. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Next, we have a project that's been ongoing for really a couple of years. And that is our road transfer agreement between the county and the Indiana Department of Transportation. I have Josh give an overview, although I know we're fairly familiar with the discussion, but just for the record, if you provide an overview on the proposal that we've received from NDOT.
Yes. So this is obviously as a result of I-69 being built. State Code 823-4 gives the opportunity for the state to transfer roads to local municipalities, or vice versa, depending on the need. The intent of the code in this area is these are going to be roads that are predominantly going to be for local use. So once they are no longer needed as part of the I-69 corridor, they want to transfer them to us. Where this project left off late last year, there was a sticking point on indemnification. I will let Jim address that point. I think we are comfortable with that now, and we wanted to give you all an opportunity to weigh in. We do also have County Engineer Tony Hinkle on the line. We will give him an opportunity to answer any questions you have or speak on behalf of it. And then there is an exhibit that has been provided to you all. I know Commissioner Boyles has a little concern about that, and so I want to make sure we have a chance to discuss all that.
Thank you, Josh.
I would just point to substantially paragraph 2.12, which is on page 8, addressing the identification. The prior language essentially said the county identifies the state, period, and we thought it prudent to insert some language that the county does not identify the state for anything approximately caused by errors, omissions, or defects in construction or design prior to the county taking those roads over. We've been back and forth with a couple different versions with the state, and I'm satisfied that we've addressed that concern.
Anything further?
I think that's all.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions of Jim?
Okay. Tony, we want to go ahead and give you an opportunity to speak. We're going to put the mic down on the computer now.
I have a comment for it. I reviewed the exhibits that were produced by NDOT. They match similar to what I had provided previously. I think mine include what's down by Pine Boulevard and Turkey Track, where NDOT exclusively deals with the area around the church. If the commissioners have any questions, I'll be great to answer.
Any questions from the board? I can relay to Tony. Do you have some concerns, Mr. Boyles?
Yes. They have indicated that looks like the lower portions of the Liberty Church overpass is going to be county responsibility. And I disagree with that adamantly. The portion of Liberty Church that goes over the overpass on the west side of I-69, that needs to go all the way down to the edge where Liberty Church meets Turkey Track and Legendary Drive. They've got us taken care of from the access and exits off of 69, but NDOT needs to go all the way down to where Liberty Church hits Turkey Track and Legendary. Then on the other side of the overpass, same thing. They have us coming up to the exits and entrances to 69. That needs to be taken care of by NDOT all the way down to the intersection of Hacker Creek Road and Old State Road 37. That intersection, the state needs to go all the way to the east side of that intersection. And also that, bridge up there over, Jordan Creek. That's all tied in with the one that's, goes under I-69 there. And we should not have to take care of that and do any maintenance on that. That ought to be part of 69's, or NDOT's responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Boyles. I can't say that I disagree, and I don't disagree. So I guess my question would be,
Well, they
what's
got us taking care of, you know, the lower portion of those ramps, and I don't think that ought to be it. So,
So Jim and Josh have kind of taken the front lines on the back and forth with them. Do you know, what kind of appetite, and Tony as well, what kind of appetite do you think the state would have on those concessions?
Well, quite honestly, I'm not real sure myself, in so much as I kind of probably focused, I think, more on the language than the exhibits for one, and secondly, there were a couple instances even within the language in which they were pretty adamantly opposed to changes. That being said, I think that's a valid point. I don't know if that's previously been discussed with them, like Dale, or I'm not sure if Josh and Tony were talking about that in the meeting.
Mr. Hinkle would like to say something?
So the exhibits we prepared were not precise to what's actually the exhibits in the transfer agreement. What the county will be taking over on both the east and west sides that are part of the overpass between the access roads and the on and off ramps is about split the difference. So about half of that road we will currently get in the transfer agreement. The other half will be taken by NDOT. So it's about a halfway, according to the exhibits in the transfer agreement. If you want us to go back to NDOT and go right up to where that intersection is, I can't speak for them. I don't know if they have a problem with that, but that would just be the issue of a couple hundred feet on each side.
So Tony, would you say, based on the concern, and I see his point, you know, I definitely see his point, would we be best served by tabling this and asking NDOT on, you know, what their appetite would be on that concession, and then looking at this again, or what do you think on next steps?
I think it's a valid point to make. For as long as this has been going on, we should bring that up to NDOT and see where that line was drawn and why, and ask the question. And if this pushes to the next meeting before we get the answer and we sign at the next meeting, I don't see any beneficial to pushing it through now as opposed to waiting until the next meeting.
Okay. Yeah, the point taken on how long this has been pending. So I think based on the question that's raised, it sounds like we are in good standing with the document itself, but just want to seek some clarification on the concession that they may make here on this additional frontage. So do we want to have a consensus to table this and ask NDOT for that concession and then consider this at a later date? If so, we can entertain that as a motion.
I would make a motion that we table it and throw these suggestions back out to them, see how they might react.
We have a motion on the floor to table the agreement and ask NDOT for potential concessions on the intersection, the two intersections here at the overpass that have been acknowledged in our meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion on that carries 3-0. Next item on our agenda, we have the Morgan County Auditor to give an overview on a service agreement for tax software that his office has vetted and would like to move forward with.
So before you is our contracts, one for the tax system to change to Exsoft as our vendor, and the other is for our financial payroll system that we want to change vendor to Lau Associates. This was presented to the county council at their last meeting, and they approved the funding for this, and so we're wanting to move forward with getting that project started. Basically the bottom line for the annual service fees for each of those systems is very close to the same as what we're paying now with our current vendor. There's a slight increase with the financial payroll, but almost exactly the same with the tax system. The tax system, the payments would be for the purchase of the system would be spread over a 5-year period, and the payments for the financial payroll would be spread over a 3-year period. That's for the initial fees to purchase the systems. The tax or the financial payroll is 124, or might as well round up to $125,000, and then for the total fee for the tax system is $305,000, and the 305 would be spread over 5 years, and the 124 or 125,000 would be spread over 3 years. We're in need to switch vendors. The Exsoft is the vendor that the county assessor has utilized for many years for their assessing system. And in the last couple of years, Exsoft has developed a property tax billing and tax collection system. This would work very well with the assessor's office. It would be fully integrated, and there would be immediate exchange of information between the assessor to the auditor to the treasurer, and then back again. We'd all share in the information. Both of these systems are a database type structured system, meaning that the information collected in the systems will be stored in a database, which would give us the opportunity to analyze and report on that data in any way, that shape or form that we might want to do. That is something that we are very much lacking with our present two systems. We're very limited to their canned programs or canned reports, with a few exceptions, but basically we're limited to those reports. And if we want to analyze the data or report on the data in any way different than what they've already provided as reporting, we're pretty much lost.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions of Dan on the two proposals?
There's two proposals? Yes, there are two separate systems. But they're two separate vendors. One vendor, Exsoft, is the vendor and the system for the property tax billing and collection system. And then the other contract or proposals from Lau Associates, that is for the financial payroll system. These are two separate systems, but currently our vendor that, as of last fall, it was different before that. The vendor that we have our financial payroll with, and also our tax billing and collection, is the same vendor. The vendor that had the tax system sold the tax system to the vendor that we have now, which is Harris. Harris is who owns both now owns both the tax system and the financial payroll. I will frankly tell you that ever since the sale of the system to Harris last fall, the service has been very, very poor. Our ability to produce and create tax bills was very much delayed this spring. We being the auditor and the treasurer and the assessor, we were all in a position and ready to be able to create bills and get bills out on the street no later than mid-February. And I really think it would have been more like 1st of February, but regardless, but with different updates and revisions that our vendor had to do, we were delayed until shortly before April 15th before we were able to get bills on the street, and that's just not acceptable. The financial payroll system hasn't had any enhancements for many years. Only enhancements that have occurred to the system are those that they had to do legally to be in compliance with state and federal law, but to enhance it beyond that, that hasn't occurred. And I foresee the same to happen with our tax system, and I'm not ready. I don't think that we want to have that happen.
I'd make a motion we approve both proposals.
There's a motion on the floor to approve both the Lau and Associates and the Exoff proposals as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? I want to thank Dan for his due diligence on this. I know you looked hard at your different options and presented us with two good choices to move forward. All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Next on the agenda is an update on our opioid litigation.
Yeah, I just have a brief update. This now dates right at a couple of years that this has been pending. I've been in communication with both our counsel, Jonathan Nola, Cohen Malad, and Steve Oliver locally. Recently, we, on the county's behalf, they submitted a proof of claim form that was required in order to continue to pursue in the potential or pending bankruptcy of Purdue Pharma. That wasn't due until June 30th. As it stands now, there's a tentative global settlement agreement, but everything is tentative at this point, including how the funds in that settlement agreement would be distributed, and essentially the tentative agreement would pay $1.6 billion to settle all opioid-related claims against the company, and it would be part of a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I suspect, particularly with the June 30 deadline, that this is something that will just continue to develop over the next several months, and maybe we can give a more substantive update as it arises.
Sure. Any questions of Jim? Thank you. Next item on the agenda, we have discussion of an OKRA grant, and this would be essentially the commissioners agreeing to move forward in completing a grant application. The Office of Community and Rural Affairs, better known by most of us as OKRA, have made available funding to local units of government for a variety of different things that are related to COVID-19. In the earlier stages of this pandemic, they were offering funding to build emergency hospital, kind of shelter, different things of that nature, temporary structures, and that over time has evolved into a loan or a grant program for local businesses. And we came up against a quick, hard deadline to file a letter of intent, which we met, which we met and expressed interest in making a formal application, at least, for the Small Business Grant Program. The next step would be actual approval by the board to actually complete an application, and then to proceed with seeing what our eligibility for funding would be. You probably wanted to talk about that. Did you have something more you wanted to say?
I'll just add a few things. So like Ryan said, we came up against a hard deadline for the letter of need. There's an email attached in your packet, which essentially says we can cancel this process at any time, which is one reason we went ahead and put that letter of need in. I did ask the clarifying question, could it be a loan program and then switch to a grant program later, so that it might give us more flexibility? They did not answer that. They don't have a response to that question yet, because this program is as new to them as it is to us. And so if you all went forward, just know that if you want to do a loan program, you may not be able to switch it, although the loan program is 0% and can be forgivable. The question was also asked, can it turn into a revolving loan program if it goes well? They didn't have an answer to that one yet either. So I don't know what would be the benefit of doing a loan program. The other thing I want to point out, typically Okra money has a 20% match. This is scaled back because of the need. There is no match required, so if we were to be given grant money, we would have no obligation into it. It would be money from the feds to distribute to local businesses. I think one of the things that you all would have to grapple with if we were giving money is how are we going to give that money out, and what would that process look like, and that would be something to consider.
Right. Yeah, Josh hit on some of the differences between the grant and loan option. My personal preference would be to look to avoid the lending side of it, and maybe look to it just from the strictly as a grant distribution. How this would work if we were awarded is somewhat up to us to determine locally, but one scenario we could look at is if we were awarded the $250,000, as Josh said, there's no match required on this particular program. So we would have no financial investment in it. We could potentially look to our two chambers of commerce, both in Mooresville and Martinsville. Certainly they are the face of the small business community collectively in our community. We could look to them for some guidance on criteria, how to make the awards and things of that nature. But it's an opportunity that we felt like we should at least express our interest given the deadline, and then come to the board to determine how or if we move forward from there. Questions or comments? There aren't any. Entertain a motion on some type of next step with this Okra grant application.
Go ahead and make a motion, and we'd go ahead and further explore and possibly go ahead and do the COVID-19 grant application to CDBG.
We have a motion on the floor for the commissioners to continue with a formal grant application process. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any other discussion?
And it is my sense, I'm going to talk with Okra hopefully tomorrow. It is my sense that this will need to be submitted more quickly. So I would ask that you all consider that the motion would be to submit the grant, not wait until the next meeting, because they don't know that the timeline will last that long.
Sure.
We can definitely amend it to where it is submitted as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0 on that. Next item on our agenda, we have an agreement between Morgan County and Crider & Crider, one of the significant contractors in I-69 Section 6. I'll turn that over to you, Josh, to highlight this.
Okay. I do want to mention on the last thing, I want to thank Jamie from the Martinsville Chamber for letting us know of the deadline change for the Okra grant. Otherwise, we would not have been aware it existed.
Yes.
This was an agreement that you all approved in theory or idea before. Kreider asked to make use of a base station for their survey needs at our highway department. The pitch beam, we have an intrinsic value in this as well. If it helps them do their job better as they build the Route 69. Jim has done a great job putting this together. It essentially lays out indemnification, make sure that Kreider is aware that if we don't have anyone staffed at the building, they are not guaranteed access to their equipment. And then one item I want to put on for you all to consider tonight is we've left an area open for whether or not to consider charging Kreider and Kreider for use of electricity. It would certainly not be a lot, and I've asked them to calculate based on the usage of the equipment what that might be. I just want some direction from you all to determine if you think the value that we gain is worth not charging them, or if we really need to add a benefit to our taxpayers. So that's the only one I wasn't sure about.
My only 2 cents, I don't have a bit of problem with charging that, cause I'm sure it's a fairly lucrative contract they've got with I-69. I don't have a bit of problem with that, as long as it's within reason. I don't think they're gonna be drawing a whole lot either, but I'm fine with 10 or 15 a month, on number 7. I don't have a bit of problem with that. It is kind of making sure that they are paying for it, not the taxpayers.
Other questions or discussion? We don't have any type of estimate on what type of electrical load they may use, do we?
I don't know the equipment. He was gonna try and find that information for us.
Basically, it's just repeaters for the communication, all right? I mean, that's basically what it is, Josh. I thought that's what it was.
I don't know exactly what the equipment is.
I understand your point too, though, Kenny, that this is obviously a business expense for them, and you know, not necessarily a taxpayer expense directly. So, while I'd like to be a good neighbor, you know, if there was a reasonable concession on electrical costs, I'd be fine with that.
Have they even looked at this? Have you worked with Jeff or?
That they have not seen this agreement yet. You guys are getting first swipe at it to see if you want to make any changes before we give it to them. Although they do know that we've asked them to calculate the cost of electricity, so they know that is one of the general tenets to this.
So at this point, we would not need to put in a dollar figure.
Thank you for putting it together. You and Josh, appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, entertain a motion.
Go ahead and make a motion that we further explore the, agreement with Morgan County Board of Commissioners and Kreider on the equipment located at the Morgan County Highway Department.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the agreement and continue that discussion with Kreider and Kreider as outlined here. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Next, we have 2 tort claims for traffic accidents. Would entertain a motion to forward to our liability carrier. Motion is made. Is there a second? Motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Next item on the agenda, I'm not sure that we need formal action per se, but there is an email in your meeting agenda that the right-of-way easement that we granted to Vectren, I believe at our last meeting, for certain county-owned parcels in Willowbrook, that they would like to formally rescind that request. Do we need to take any particular action or just acknowledge that that is rescinded?
I don't think any particular
So we'll have the minutes reflect that right-of-way easement has been rescinded. Should they need that again, they'd have to reapproach us and go through that process.
And since this agenda went out, REMC sent out the same letter formally rescinding their need as well.
So that would have been obviously the other one that we granted in that same meeting. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. Getting towards the end here, next we have a park use request from a Cassie Roberts. Does anyone have more information on this particular application? It has been filled out for a baby shower. I believe the date is May 16.
What the original date was, I thought she resubmitted and was moving it back to June, if I'm not mistaken, Deb, second choice. Maybe I'm wrong. Looks like May 16th and second option is May 17th.
I think that is different than the first one.
Okay.
I don't necessarily have a concern per se, just the unknown with the state of the virus efforts in Indiana, and whether or not this would be considered by the governor's executive order as an essential activity, or if it would even be relevant at the time. Certainly hopeful that by May 16th it's not a relevant issue, but it's certainly possible. So I don't know to what extent that changes the board's thoughts, or if it does at all. Let that be up to the event organizer. Do you have any thoughts, Jim, from a legal perspective on, where we may go with this?
Well, maybe as far as a specific request like this, I mean, I would tend to fall in line with whatever the current state of the governor's order is, which we very well may not know until at least the last day or two of this month and or May 1st. Perhaps waiting until the beginning of May meeting to address it, albeit I understand she probably wants to plan for things, but I think given the circumstances that the public interest lies in that as well as following the governor's order.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a catch-22 from a planning standpoint. You've got to have a date and time and a location. But I think it would be incumbent upon us in making the best use of public property that any approval that we would give would probably have to be conditioned upon it not being contrary to any state orders at the time.
I agree with that.
Any other discussion? I think we have somewhat of an agreement on how to move forward, so not hearing any other discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
Go ahead and make a motion, we approve the agreement for Cassie Roberts for mid-May, being May 16th, May 17th, with the condition that it does not conflict with what the state has in place as far as with the coronavirus and the shutdown, so.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the park usage application as presented here with the stipulation that our approval is conditioned upon this event not being contrary to any state order at the time. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. We'll move into some of our final construction projects at the Justice Center, which is the former Reporter Times building being renovated for the prosecutor in Title 4D. And I'll turn it over to Josh to discuss these last couple of steps that we have here as we start to wrap up this project.
Yes. So in your packet, you have a sheet that says budget sheet proposal number 2. From there on until you see the quote from Otto's Pavement and Marking, that is what Commissioner Hale has provided you all in the past. He just wanted to make sure that everyone had that and include it in the packet. And so that is not new information. Again, as we've talked about through this process, there are things that have come up that need to be addressed along the way. There are a handful of items that I'll go through with you. One is to restripe the parking lot and get that ready for public use. One is some improved exterior lighting on the outside of the building from Midwest Electric. One is something that was pointed out by the Title IV-D group, which is now that their main entrance will be on the side of the building, it would be nice if they had a sidewalk between the parking lot and the building for the safety of the people, especially with children coming through their property. One is, it was kind of left open-ended at the beginning of this process, how to handle the build-out of the kitchen areas. And so there are the quotes in here for the final layout of those now that they're ready. And then the last item in here is to decommission. There are 2 wells that are part of an old geothermal system, and it is a quote from Jackson Well Drilling to decommission those. And so those are the items before you. In the aggregate, they are $25,514.16.
Give me, Josh, $25,514.16.
Yes, that is the numbers I came up with.
And that, obviously with any construction project, things can change, but for all intents and purposes, we expect that to be the extent of the work that we need to do to that building. Is that accurate?
I have not heard of more conversations, but I'm not ready to definitively say that there won't be more.
Okay.
It is really winding down, looking good.
Any questions or discussion on what amounts to these four items: restriping the parking lot, exterior lighting improvements, sidewalk, walkway for Title IV-D, and the decommission of the wells that are on the property?
Josh, the front entryway, was that included in one of these, I believe?
Yes, good catch, it should be. Well, it should be, but it's not.
That's what I was thinking. I knew there was one more, that entryway, get rid of that mass display case. Get rid of that sticker on the front of that.
I will need to check on that one. I would say that somewhere I didn't get that submitted with the rest of these, so I apologize for that. I will get with you guys on that one.
Okay, that'll work.
Any other questions? If there aren't any other questions, I'd entertain a motion on these 4 items.
Go ahead and make a motion, we go ahead and approve the 4 change orders as outlined in the amount of $25,514.16.
We have a motion on the floor to approve all 4 of the projects here for the Reporter Times building. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approval signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And motion on that carries 3-0. Any other business that needs to come before the board? I know you have There's a COVID-19 spending report in front of each of you. Do you want to run through anything on that, or just for information?
Again, this is informational. I just want to try and get you guys the changes at each of your meetings. The only things I'll really note is there was only, since our last meeting, an increase of $5,225 in additional spending. Part of that being because two of our orders from EMA unfortunately had to be canceled for protective equipment. And so $11,209 came off of the top of our last meeting, and then we've had some additional expenditures. So now our net spending is at $63,711.
And that is coming from the $100,000 appropriation from the county council on COVID-related expenses. Any other questions or items that need to come before the board? Any department heads that need to address any issues? Josh, if you could give our department heads on the meeting one call out. I know we don't have very many this evening.
Text messages.
Okay. With that being said, our next meeting will be on May 4th, Monday morning at 9:30. We hope to be back to a little bit closer to normal at that point, but we're going to have to stay tuned to see what changes come towards the end of this extension. So until then,
Motion to adjourn.
be careful, enjoy the evening, and there's a motion to adjourn, and we'll see you May 4th.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah, what I was thinking you were saying is this exactly what this is.
That dog sure is growing up way too fast. She's growing way too fast. What are you? Sophomore, junior now?
I'll be a freshman.
A freshman, okay.
If they would go back?
Yeah.
If they go back?
Very fair ask. This one is two. Yeah, I'll get through all the doubles real quick.
So I didn't look for the so far.
Most people, when they get old, should be smarter.
She says this guy hardly blank.
I sure didn't want to go to work.
But it did.
Like he's saying, that's how.
I mean, the seven outside of that regardless.
I thought that was very fair.
Acted as a room, I went to access the
Construction, what's going on?
Yeah, I think I'd say.
Well, I was screwed, you know. Open the door for children. Only for that revenue, so we'll see.
Thank you, sir.
See you, James.
Thank you.
Ken,
I think we
back
have
to
to
Bobby.
people, if they're really being honest about that Boston consortium, if it would actually be a negative to them. If they're really being honest.
I hope the webinar wasn't almost. Yeah. I understand the theory behind it, but there needs to be some kind of reform to it.
I don't agree. I think he just gave us that copy because he hadn't read it, and it just like got stuck. So that's yours, that copy. It's kind of surprising how many
He does a great job. You see all that, he's really more than what they've done on all the
Yeah.
reporter times. Sean, last Thursday, so Sean, I said, "You don't have to go in and do it on your own." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I have no business." I said, "Yeah, but," and then you stay subbed out to Rick pretty heavily, and Josh Rhodes.
Oh, yeah.
He says, or not Josh, but Jeff, he says, "Kenny, I've got jobs going right now, it's on my own." I said, "Which?" He said, "Yeah, like 5 or 6 different." He says, "If I got to, I can go on about 20 of them." So, well, I said, "Well, I would love to teach you." I got tired of driving. I couldn't do it, so I told him, I said, "I'll give it to you this week." And,
Is this a Baldwin? Driver license Baldwin?
Courtney? Yes.
Yeah.
She lives on the road right next to the park. She's got a concern that trees in the head and fall. That's Kim Harris. I said, "So you're in Kim's old house, right?"
Want them just a second.
Kim Harris. She was supposed to do that.
Oh, sure. Since there's not so many, I'll just do them all.
Don't do the last page, that was.
Oh, yeah, on the front.
This is really, really nice inside, still, the bids last year was. They would definitely include a little bit of cleanup on some hopes and concrete block work, the only addition was going to go in, because that whole thing I'm not so shocked at the same thing. But it's gonna be a project where I just couldn't do it, cut myself into this.
What were your thoughts on ISIL altogether with this up here? Break their schedule.
What?
They still have to do all the other stuff there.
I think we're still doing it. I think so. This is looking at there's some monster permits. Don't really like the way they changed the skylight number one. They took the big skylight out that was up there and they left the square. So they put a little bit of rectangle glass out like this. There's 8 of them, 2 on each side. They're down from the roof, like probably a good foot, 16 inches. So when you get one coming in, you can't see out.
Don't love it.
No, I didn't like that. I think I really did one. Everything else over there. It's got tile, the marble, and just plain for the place. I only do 2 of them.
Yeah, I need a phase. Change that. But normally the top is,
I don't know if we'll use it. I don't have a problem touching it. We got our form, everything we do is trying, and I'm trying to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm gonna try it on my computer in there and see. I even tried Zoom, I can't get it to touch. No.
Usually that does the trick.
I don't know, maybe we can try it again. I might reach out to Miss Deborah, you want.
I never turned off the live stream.
Oh.